The sky cracked with thunder as torrential rain lashed the rainforest canopy. Deep in the tangle of dripping foliage, a small, fragile sloth clung desperately to a crooked branch. His fur, soaked and matted, trembled with every gust of wind. He was young, barely a year old, and alone. A violent storm had separated him from his mother days ago, and now, tangled high above the forest floor, he had wedged his arm between two boughs. The branch had snapped and pinned his limb in place. Each movement sent a ripple of pain through his tiny frame. Birds fled the treetops. Leaves flew like daggers. The world screamed around him, but he could not cry out. He was trapped. He was forgotten. He was fading. Beneath him, the jungle raged, deaf to his silent suffering. And yet his eyes remained open, glassy, frightened, but alive. Somewhere hope still clung as tightly as he did. Miles away, deep in the same rainforest basin, Maya, a 34-year-old wildlife rescue coordinator, jolted upright from her cramped tent cot. Her radio buzzed with interference, but she had heard it, just faintly. A local report from a passing hiker about an animal crying out above the storm. The words were clipped, but the location was close. She shoved on her boots, threw a slick yellow poncho over her shoulders, and stepped into the downpour. Maya had seen too much suffering in her decade of rescues, but something about this felt urgent, personal even. Not tonight, she whispered to herself. Not again. As her boots sank into the mud, she turned toward the coordinates and started her trek. Somewhere something was barely hanging on, and Maya wasn't going to let it slip away. The forest trail was half flooded, vines sagging with rainwater, and slick roots hidden under the mud. Maya moved with practiced urgency, each step deliberate, avoiding the traps of the jungle's chaos. Thunder cracked overhead, echoing like a warning drumbeat. Her breathing quickened, not from fear, but from the aching truth that time was thinning. Whatever creature had cried out didn't have long. Come on, she muttered, ducking under a fallen limb. Her flashlight flickered as water dripped from her brow. Insects buzzed, frogs croaked warnings. But the jungle told no lies. It was hiding something. And Maya was close. Then she heard it. A faint rustling, a sound out of place. She froze. Raised her light. There, high above, something shifted between the branches. Not the wind. Not a bird. She squinted. A mass of fur, unmoving, except for a trembling claw. Her heart kicked against her ribs. Sloth, she breathed. But not just any sloth. This one was in trouble. Maya dropped her bag, radioed coordinates, and assessed the climb. It was steep. Thought. Dangerous. A vertical tangle of wet bark and rot. But the sloth had no time to wait. Rain pelted her skin like needles. Still, she started up. She would not stop. Each foothold was slick, each branch a gamble. Maya gripped tight, heart pounding, every inch of her body soaked and trembling. The sloth didn't move. Not even when she reached the midpoint. It was losing strength, fast. She could see the pain in its twisted posture. Hold on, little one, Maya called gently, her voice nearly drowned by the wind. She reached upward, fingers clawing for the next branch. One slip would send her falling, but her gaze never left the sloth's eyes. They were wide, helpless, but not dead. Not yet. I've got you, she whispered through clenched teeth. Maya reached the sloth, her fingers trembling as she steadied herself on the final branch. The creature didn't flinch, didn't react. He was barely conscious. His arm was grotesquely twisted between two bark-crusted limbs, raw and swollen. Rain streamed down his face like tears. Hey there, Maya said gently, voice cracking under the wind. You're not alone anymore. She pulled a scarf from her coat pocket, carefully wrapping it around the sloth's torso for support. We're getting you out of this. Her eyes scanned the damage. No way to slide him free without hurting him more. She needed tools, needed help. but letting go now might cost him his life. So she stayed, soaked to the bone, cradling the fragile weight of him as lightning fractured the sky. In that moment, it wasn't rescuer and animal. It was survivor and survivor, side by side. Back on the forest floor, Maya's assistant Jonah scrambled through the mud with a medkit strapped to his back. The radio crackled in his ear. "Jonah, I need splints, rope, and a rescue sling. Tree is unstable. Sloths in bad shape." Jonah's breath caught. He had seen Maya take on impossible climbs before, but this one sounded different. He picked up his pace, boots sinking ankle-deep in wet soil. "I'm 5 minutes out," he radioed back. His voice betrayed urgency and fear. Rain blurred his vision, but his mission was clear. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a lifeline. And Maya was counting on him. Up in the tree, Maya adjusted the scarf binding and whispered softly to the sloth. "I know it hurts, but help's on the way." She could feel his shallow breath against her arm. Time was slipping. She examined the branches above and below. Any wrong move could bring both of them down. The wind howled, shaking the tree with every gust. Maya gritted her teeth and anchored her boot tighter against the forked trunk. She refused to show fear. "Stay awake, little guy," she said, brushing wet leaves from his face. His eyes blinked slowly, almost gratefully. The connection between them deepened in silence. No words, no noise, just shared pain, and the will to hold on a little longer. Jonah finally arrived at the base of the tree, panting. He looked up through the torrent. Maya was barely a silhouette in the storm. "Rope's coming up," he shouted, strapping one end to a weighted pouch and launching it upward. Maya caught it on the third try, fingers numb but focused. She quickly rigged a harness, looping it around her waist, and then carefully fashioning a cradle for the sloth. Her motions were precise, years of field rescues boiled into instinct. Jonah began to stabilize the base with tension knots as Maya began the most delicate part, freeing the sloth's arm without making it worse. "We've got one shot at this," she muttered. "Just one." Maya secured the harness around the sloth's fragile frame, breath shaking as she maneuvered the makeshift sling under his belly. One branch shift, then another, and finally, with one precise move, she eased his arm free. The sloth jerked weakly, a moan barely audible over the storm. "Shh. I know," Maya whispered, lowering him gently into the cradle. Jonah tightened the rope below. "Lowering now," Maya called. Inch by inch, the bundle descended towards safety. Maya held her breath until she saw Jonah catch him. Relief collapsed her shoulders. She wasn't done yet. But for now, the sloth was out of the tree, and out of the storm. Jonah placed the sloth onto a tarp-covered mat, shielding him from the rain as best he could. The arm was badly inflamed, possibly fractured. Blood mixed with mud. Maya descended seconds later, breathless, legs shaking. She dropped beside the sloth, checked his vitals, then gave a sharp nod. "We stabilize here. We can't carry him in this storm." Jonah unpacked supplies, hands fumbling in the wet. "We'll have to splint in the field?" he asked. Maya nodded. "No choice." The sloth's eyes fluttered, barely conscious. Time was tight, and they had no cover, no protection, and barely enough light. Maya whispered, "You've made it this far. Stay with me." The jungle offered no shelter, just danger. Predators prowled in storms. And time was turning against them. The splint had to be improvised, 2 smooth sticks wrapped with gauze and sealed in place with tape. Maya steadied the sloth's torso while Jonah aligned the limb. The sloth whimpered, his body stiffening in pain. "Almost there," Maya muttered. Every movement was delicate, performed under pressure and pelting rain. Jonah's hands slipped once, nearly dropping the gauze. "Breathe," Maya said firmly, more to herself than him. The jungle roared around them, loud and indifferent. Finally, the limb was immobilized. Maya wrapped the rest of his tiny frame in thermal fabric, shielding him from shock. He's stable, for now, she said, wiping mud from her brow. Now we move. But movement was a new gamble, one they had no choice but to make. They fashioned a stretcher from their gear, 2 poles and a forest green rescue cloth, wrapping the sloth like sacred cargo. Maya and Jonah hoisted the ends, and began the trek. The trail was steeper now, riddled with fallen trees and waterlogged gullies. Lightning cracked above, illuminating the eerie silence. Every few steps Maya checked the sling, adjusting for the sloth's weight. "He's breathing," Jonah said, voice thin with effort. The journey felt endless. Fatigue gnawed at their limbs. And still they pushed forward, deeper into mud and shadow. But in Maya's eyes burned a promise: this little life would not fade. Not on her watch. They reached a checkpoint clearing near dawn, fog rolling low between the trees. An old ranger station stood abandoned, but offered cover. Jonah kicked the door open. Inside, the air was musty and dry. Maya laid the sloth down on a sleeping mat, and immediately radioed HQ. "Medical evac needed. Injured sloth, stabilized, requires immediate transport." Static. Then a voice: "All teams grounded until storm clears. 4-hour delay minimum." Maya's jaw tightened. He doesn't have 4 hours. Silence followed. The system had failed them before. She wouldn't let it again. "If they won't send help," she said to Jonah, "we bring help to him." Maya's mind raced. No rescue, no time, and no second chances. The sloth's breathing was shallower now, the strain of pain and exposure catching up. She unrolled her personal med kit, her emergency stash. An IV line, a thermal pad, a few precious antibiotics. "He needs more than I can give," she whispered, voice cracking. Jonah looked out at the stormlight breaking through the trees. "Unnew. What if we go back through the ridge trail? It's higher ground, less flooded." Maya paused. Risky. Tight. But the only option left. "We move in 10, she said. The moment hung heavy. 2 humans, 1 fragile creature, and a choice that meant everything. They weren't just rescuing him anymore. They were fighting with him. The ridge trail was narrow and treacherous, clinging to the mountainside like a lifeline carved into stone. Jonah led, flashlight slicing through the fog, while Maya balanced the stretcher against her hip. Each step was deliberate, boots slipping on wet moss. The sloth barely moved, tucked deep in the thermal wrap, his breathing faint but present. Maya's mind spun, timing terrain, storm maps. But underneath the calculation lived something rawer. Guilt. Bite. "I lost 1 last year," she said softly. Jonah turned his head. "What?" She didn't meet his gaze. "Same storm season. Young howler, we were too late." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, shared. The kind born of pain that never fades but teaches. And maybe, this time, she'd get to rewrite the ending. The path narrowed near a cliff edge, where an old warning sign barely clung to a leaning post. Jonah paused, adjusting his grip. "You sure this is better than waiting?" Maya stopped, eyes fixed on the trail ahead. "If he goes into shock before backup gets here, we lose him." "Aye." She adjusted the sling and kept walking. But as she passed the sign, her boot slipped. Her leg shot out, nearly sending the stretcher sideways. Jonah caught the edge just in time. "You all right?" he panted. Maya nodded, breathless. "Close," she muttered. Closer than she'd admit. Every minute on this trail was a wager. And the stakes were climbing. As they rounded a bend, the jungle gave way to a small clearing overlooking the valley. Maya paused, staring into the canopy below. "This is where we lost him," she whispered. Jonah turned. "Who?" "The..." She exhaled. "The howler. I've been trying to avoid this place for a year." Her voice cracked. "But maybe I wasn't meant to." Jonah stepped closer. "You think this sloth is your redemption?" Maya shook her head. "No, he's not mine to redeem. But maybe he's here to remind me that loss doesn't end the work, it strengthens it." The sloth stirred faintly, as if hearing her. Maya tightened the blanket and took a deep breath. The past couldn't be rewritten, but today she could write a better line. A rumble echoed across the sky, distant but approaching. Maya turned to see dark clouds regrouping beyond the ridgeline. "We've got less than 30 minutes before the second front hits," she warned. Jonah looked at the map on his GPS unit. "Nearest shelter's the Ranger Tower, 15 minutes east if we run it." Maya hesitated, looking at the sloth. His arm won't handle more shaking. Jonah met her gaze. "We'll cradle him between us, less bounce." No time left for fear or debate. They tied the stretcher's sides to their shoulders, creating a sling between them. Then, as the first drops of new rain fell, they ran, through pain, fatigue, and the past. Because this time, the storm wouldn't win. They reached the Ranger Tower just as the sky cracked open again. Lightning danced across the horizon. The structure loomed above, a weather-beaten tower of iron and wood. Maya pushed open the door with her shoulder, and they stumbled inside. Safe, for now. She laid the sloth gently on a dry cot and fell to her knees beside him. Jonah checked vitals, faint but steady. Maya brushed her fingers over the sling. "You made it," she whispered. But what neither of them expected came next. The sloth opened his mouth, not to cry, but to make a faint clicking sound. It wasn't pain. It was relief. Maya's eyes widened. "He's conscious." For the first time in hours, the storm outside raged, but inside, hope finally whispered back. Inside the Ranger Tower, Maya and Jonah worked quickly. The sloth was awake, but slipping. His body trembled under the strain of trauma, and his breathing began to rattle. "He's crashing," Jonah muttered. Maya reached for the IV, adjusting the flow. "His lungs might be filling. We need to elevate and stabilize now." She tore open their last emergency oxygen pack and slipped the mask over the sloth's snout. His eyes rolled weakly. "Stay with me," Maya whispered, her voice cracking. Every moment inside was war against the storm outside. Rain pounded the tower like fists from the heavens. But Maya refused to let go. "You didn't survive that tree to die here. Not in my arms." She pressed her palm gently over his tiny chest, counting breaths. Time blurred. And then, his chest rose again, stronger. A helicopter's low thrum began to build in the distance, almost drowned by thunder. Jonah jumped to the window, eyes scanning the trees. "Evac's coming," he shouted. Maya's eyes didn't leave the sloth. "We hold him steady until they land." Wind screamed through cracks in the tower walls. Below, trees swayed violently. The helipad was barely a clearing, now slippery with wet leaves. "They'll never land in this," Jonah muttered. Maya stood and grabbed a flare from the emergency kit. "Then we make it safe." She burst out into the storm, flare in hand, boots sliding across the wooden deck. The red light hissed and sizzled as she planted it into the pad. Thunder boomed above. Her soaked silhouette stood defiantly beneath the chopper's descent. The chopper descended unevenly, buffeted by wind. Maya waved the pilot down, flare still burning. Jonah brought the stretcher out, shielding the sloth with a tarp. The noise was deafening. Maya shouted directions as the paramedics leapt down. Fractured limbs stabilized, oxygen administered, shock likely. The paramedics moved quickly, strapping the sloth into a soft trauma cradle. One turned to Maya. "You did more than most field hospitals." Maya didn't smile. Her eyes were locked on the sloth. "Just get him to one." The team loaded him into the cabin. The storm still howled, but the worst had passed. The rescue was now in someone else's hands. For the first time in hours, Maya's shoulders dropped. He was alive. And he was leaving. As the helicopter lifted into the storm-torn sky, Maya stepped back, soaked and shaking, eyes still tracking its path. Jonah touched her shoulder. "You all right?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I am." But her eyes glistened. She wasn't thinking about her pain or the storm. She was thinking of the sloth, small and broken, but still fighting. "You think he'll make it?" Jonah asked. "He already has," she replied, voice barely audible over the wind. "He didn't give up, neither did we. The storm hadn't beaten them. Not tonight." As the red taillight disappeared into the clouds, the trees fell silent. For the first time in days, the jungle breathed. Back inside, Maya peeled off her soaked poncho, the weight of it symbolic. She sat near the abandoned cot, her fingers brushing the thermal blanket the sloth had used. Jonah poured 2 cups of coffee from a battered thermos, handing one to her. They didn't speak for a while. They didn't need to. Outside, the storm faded into mist, morning light beginning to touch the treetops. Maya finally spoke. "He was never just an animal stuck in a tree." Jonah nodded. "He was proof something small can survive anything." Maya looked out the window. "No, he was proof we all can." She didn't just rescue the sloth. He rescued something inside her too. 3 days later, the veterinary recovery center buzzed with quiet urgency. The sloth, now affectionately named Rafa, lay in a humidity-controlled enclosure, his injured arm immobilized in a pristine cast. Monitors beeped steadily. Maya stood outside the glass, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the sleeping figure. A young vet emerged, clipboard in hand. "Vitals are improving. No infection. He's responding better than we expected." Maya exhaled slowly. Relief swept through her like sunlight after storm clouds. "Will he climb again?" The vet smiled gently. "It'll take time, but yes." Maya's gaze softened. "Then, I'll wait." She didn't just want to know he'd live, she needed to see him thrive. Only then would the story feel complete. Later that afternoon, Maya entered Rafa's enclosure for physical contact therapy. The sloth blinked slowly, recognizing her scent, his nostrils twitching. She crouched beside him and gently placed her hand near his paw. He hesitated, then curled his claw around her thumb. A small gesture, but powerful. "There you are," she whispered. His fur had been cleaned, his eyes clearer now. "You're stronger than anyone gave you credit for." Her voice carried no grandeur, just honest awe. It wasn't just the animal's survival, it was his resilience. Maya had spent years patching up wounds. But for once, she was witness to healing from the inside out. That evening, Jonah arrived at the center with fresh supplies and a rare smile. "Heard Rafa's climbing again," he said, dropping a box of fresh leaves onto the prep table. Maya looked up from her notes. "He took 2 full grips today, just slow pulls but focused." Jonah chuckled. "Fitting, isn't it? Nature's slowest climber still makes it to the top." They both laughed, a sound free from tension for the first time in days. "What about you?" Jonah asked. "Climbing again?" Maya looked toward the sloth enclosure, then back at him. "Not yet, but I'm thinking about it." The path ahead for both of them wasn't clear, but it was open. And that was enough. The next morning, Maya watched from a distance as Rafa climbed halfway up a small simulated tree in his enclosure. His movements were slow, calculated, but steady. He paused at the midpoint, claws gripping the bark, nostrils flaring as if inhaling strength. Maya didn't speak, she simply observed. This was his journey now. Every inch earned. Every branch, a quiet triumph. Her radio buzzed on the table nearby. Another rescue call coming in. She let it ring for a moment longer than usual. Then finally, she picked it up. "This is Maya," she said. "Send me the coordinates." It was time to keep going. Because someone else, somewhere, was still waiting to be found. As Maya walked away from the center, her boots crunching softly on gravel, the sun broke fully through the clouds. The jungle shimmered ahead, lush, wild, and endless. She paused just before reaching the gate, and looked back once more. Inside, Rafa had reached the top perch, his small frame silhouetted in the light. It was a quiet victory, but powerful. Maya's chest swelled, not with pride, but gratitude. For the fight. for the failure that taught her to keep trying, and for the sloth who reminded her that survival isn't about how fast you climb, it's about never letting go. With that, she stepped forward into the unknown, ready to answer the next call. 2 months later, deep in the rainforest where it all began, the rescue team gathered again. This time, not in crisis, but in ceremony. The forest was alive with birdsong and light mist rising from the leaves. In Maya's arms, Rafa rested calmly, now healthier, heavier, his fur glossy and clean. His arm still bore a faint scar, but it moved with confidence. "He's ready," the vet said softly. Maya nodded. She wasn't here as a rescuer anymore. She was here as a witness to freedom. She looked up at the canopy where strong branches twisted high above. "Let's give him back to the sky," she whispered. The world had taken much from this creature, but today it was giving something back. Maya stepped toward the chosen tree, a massive ceiba with deep roots and sprawling limbs. Jonah climbed partway up, preparing a platform for the release. Maya kissed her palm and pressed it to Rafa's head. "You did this," she said. "Not me." With care, she placed him on the trunk. He hesitated for only a moment, then slowly reached upward. One claw at a time, he pulled himself toward the branches above. Each movement was precise, determined. Not rushed, but assured. The group watched in reverent silence as he climbed higher and higher. Maya's eyes filled. It wasn't just a climb. It was defiance. It was return. It was survival, written in motion. Halfway up, Rafa paused on a sturdy branch. He turned his head slowly, gazing downward, not in fear, but with instinctual awareness. His body swayed gently with the wind. For the first time since his fall, he was where he belonged, above ground, in his world, not a hospital bed. Maya inhaled deeply, remembering every second of the storm, the climb, the panic. And now this perfect stillness. Jonah whispered, "He's home." Maya nodded, a single tear tracing her cheek. "And he remembers." The jungle embraced Rafa with dappled light, and a quiet hush, as if honoring the return of one of its own. Later, as the team packed their gear, Maya lingered at the base of the tree. She listened. No cries, no panic, only the rustling of leaves and the soft rustle of climbing limbs. In that moment she realized something. She wasn't the same woman who had scaled that storm-torn tree. She had climbed with grief. Now she walked with grace. "We saved him," Jonah said, walking up beside her. Maya shook her head slowly. "No, he saved us. Reminded us why we started this in the first place." They stood quietly, heads tilted back, silhouettes framed by the light-filled canopy. Above them, Rafa disappeared into the wild. As the team hiked away, the forest behind them closed with soft sound, branches creaking, birds chirping, the timeless language of nature. But one sound lingered, a soft clicking. High above, Rafa pressed his claw gently to a branch, letting out the same faint vocalization Maya had first heard in the tower. Not pain, presence. Not desperation, defiance. The forest answered in kind. A breeze, a sway, a pulse of belonging. And then he vanished into the green. The screen fades on his silhouette, small but unbroken, quiet but resilient. He had been a victim, but now he was something more, something free, something unforgettable.